Hello, and welcome to Triggered Care. I'm Alex. Now, if you watched my last video, you would know that I've recently gone through a sexual assault experience. And it's hitting me different than how it normally hits me. And so I kind of want to explore that. I have notes today because I'm still finding it hard to ground and to not go on side rambles. So if you see me looking down and reading, that's why. It's kind of to keep my brain on track. So let's just get right into it. And content warning. I think I should just content warning my whole channel probably. But obviously I'm going to be talking about abuse and sexual assault and all the stuff that I'm normally rambling about. Okay. So like I was saying, this last assault hit different, and I've been reflecting on what's different about it. Because some of the symptoms that I've been going through is, it's like I get these waves of extreme anger, which I'm not used to. After an assault, usually I'm pretty sad. I'm pretty isolated and depressed, and I go through that for weeks while trying to maintain my normal and doing my autopilot stuff, going to work, taking care of the bills, taking care of stuff, right? And that's how I've dealt with assaults since forever, is kind of getting into that depressed stupor. You know, at first I victim blame myself, and then I have been practicing looking at myself like I'm a worthy human. I've been practicing that. I've been telling myself that. And it's been something that logically I can wrap my head around, even though naturally in my body, it's not how I feel. And so I've been really working hard on that. And I've made a few videos mentioning that. Like, I need to see myself as worthy by myself. Well, this last assault has definitely shown me that has changed for me. I've actually changed my feelings about myself. Not just my thoughts about myself, but my feelings. And I realize that I feel dignity now. I feel dignity for myself of I deserve peace. I deserve safety. And I'm trying to navigate the world the best I can. And how I can do that is by advocating for myself, for setting down boundaries and keeping my empathy for other people and my understanding for them, but also holding on to my boundaries to keep me safe, to keep me feeling well. And it made me have some emotional realizations this last assault, that I realized that I've improved my self-image, which if you would have asked me 10 years ago if that was even possible, I would have said no. There's no way. I hate myself so much that there's no way that I could ever care about myself. That level of self-apathy was so strong. It felt like something that would be there forever. And it would never change that feeling. Because it feels very much like a part of who I am. A part of what my personality was just written out to be. Because I didn't realize that that was a symptom of abuse. I thought that was my predisposed way of being. But along with the improved self-image, there also comes an increase in a feeling that I avoid very instinctually. I avoid being angry. I avoid expressing my anger. I avoid talking about my anger and really letting it out, because there's always been that override of, well, think about the other person's feelings. And this has got me thinking about my life and everything I've been through with this new feeling perspective. Like, sure, I've had this logical perspective before, but I was always distant from analyzing my trauma. I always kind of kept a distance there of like, well, I'm going to put this all in, very professional psychological terms, and I'm going to empathize with my abuser as well. I'm going to see why they lashed out at me. Oh, they have repressed sadness. They have repressed pain. I feel so bad for that. I want to help them with that. And very much taking myself out of the equation so I didn't have to think about how angry that violation is every time it happens. And it's happened to me quite a bit. Even in the video where I list off all the assaults, after I made it, I'm like, oh yeah, there were a couple rapes in there that I didn't even remember sitting down and trying to list them all out because there's just too many. And this has brought back this flashback that's been haunting me for the last several days. And I want to share it with you and kind of share how I'm processing it and what I'm taking from it. And I don't know if I'm open to big feedback on that since I already have a lot on my mind. I'm talking it over with my friends, and I am looking up resources. It's just, I feel so overwhelmed that, and it's a very personal issue, and I am taking a risk putting this out here while I process it. But I also think it could be very helpful for people to see me in live action being like, okay, this trauma just happened and now I'm processing it. And this is a flashback that this trauma has kind of pulled out of the dirt and it's forcing me to look at it. So I'm going to look at it, and I'm inviting you to look at it with me and kind of go through what I do to make sense of it and to kind of try to lay it to rest and not let it keep hitting me in the face and making me feel awful. So this flashback that keeps coming up, it's from several years ago, or like 3 to 4 years ago. I'm not exact on the date. I just remember which house I was living in. So that can kind of narrow down how long ago that was, because I moved quite a bit. But it was from several years ago, and I was with my ex, and we were together at the time. And we had been together for a long time, like 5 or 6 years by that point. And I'm just sitting in the living room, just chilling, just big chilling in the living room. And he's walking across the room to like go outside or to go to the office or wherever he's going. And he turns and he looks at me and he just states, "Alex, I'm an incel." And in that moment, I didn't understand what he was saying. I got confused. Like, what are you talking about? You're married to me. We have sex very regularly. I don't understand what you're saying, because I was looking at it at the very basic definition of incel, which is involuntarily celibate. And so that, well, logically, no, you're not. You are very incelibate. If my memory's working at all, I'm pretty sure that, we have sex. And I took it very literally. And now, when I hear that, I have so many different emotions and a different reaction to it, where it's like, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. with the way that our relationship dynamic went, and the way that it was very almost like transactional of a relationship. But that was my family's relationships as well, was very transactional. I offer you something, you offer me something. And what it is, incel culture is abuse culture, right? The way that incels see themselves even and see women is a very emotionally numb perspective. It's a very, and that doesn't mean that it's logical at all. Emotionally numb does not equal logical, but a lot of people, a lot of incels will be like, no, we are just purely logical beings, and that's how we see the world in this way, because it feels like that, since it doesn't feel like anything. Well, if it's not emotion, it must be logic. But in reality, you can still be very emotional while not being able to feel emotions. And along with this realization, I realized that I've had the incel culture burned into my brain. And that's the perspective that I was coming from getting out of my household. Now, I am not a man. I'm not involuntarily celibate. I'm involuntarily incelibate, if anything. But that doesn't change that little group that people know about and people point at and go, look at how weird they are. Look at how insane what they say is. But they come from somewhere. They are learning this from somewhere. Down the line, there's the neurotypical people, and then out with enough repression and enough pressure on men to cage their emotions, to be a man, to provide all of these things. This is the result of that. And it's me. I'm gonna yell about propaganda a little bit. The propaganda that is used against men to shame them from expressing any emotion, and then at the same time shaming women, because it's like, well, you don't want to be like those emotional, crazy, hysterical women over there. You don't want to be compared to them. You don't want to have your gender questioned or your sexuality questioned, showing emotions. And what that is producing are these very hurt people who are projecting that emotional numbness, that emotional repression, and that judgment of, you are not allowed to do this. And they're projecting that onto the people in their life, onto women, onto even other men, and Chads and Stacys and whatever it is. They project that out because they were never taught how to cope with stress. They were never encouraged to be artistic, to be creative, to let out those emotions that are too womanly to let out. And I'm not justifying the abuse and the murders that they fucking commit. I was married to an incel. I'm not promoting like, oh, well, just let them be, and they're just super sad boys, so maybe we should get them some women. No, that doesn't fix the problem. I tried that. I tried to marry one, and I tried to help him and offered him all the sex that he could fucking take, and then even if I didn't offer it, he still took it. So I've been in that world, and I tried to nurture the shit out of him. I tried because I'm raised to be a nurturer. I'm raised to be an enabler, and I'm raised to worship someone because that's what my programming was growing up. That's also why they use words like programming. is because it is a way, especially for trauma survivors, to help understand how their brain is working, how the world is working. Because with that constant conditioning of pain and with disrespect and invading your privacy just all the time, it conditions you to be a certain way with your emotions and your coping. And yes, people are different and they're going to have different reactions to it. But when you are in the community, you definitely notice trends of like, well, some people deal with it this way, and then other people deal with it this way. And a lot of that comes down to, are they more predisposed to be masochistic or sadistic, right? And I'm going on rambles. I gotta look back at my page. So the belief that men have in this culture is that men deserve sex because it is an animalistic need that can turn deadly if not met. And women are to fulfill that need in return for physical safety from the outside world. Now, this is hugely important, and it made me realize what had me married to my husband for so long when he would say cruel things. He would do cruel things to me. And what made me push that away and be like, well, yeah, he may be like this, but, you know, it's way more dangerous for me to be out there. And he would encourage this thought process, like, well, Alex, without me, you would be dead. Without me, you wouldn't be doing well. You'd be on the streets. And I would agree with him, like, yes, you did save me. It was very much a savior sort of narrative that we were sewing together in that delusional world of I needed a man to come save me from my family life and from the grief of my grandmother passing and the grief of the miscarriages and the assaults and all of that. I needed him to come and offer me his resources and offer me protection from the outside world, along with we did validate each other. We validated each other in the emotional numbness. We validated each other. I had suicidal fantasies. I mean, I still do, but I had suicidal fantasies all the time. And I felt safe sharing those with him because he wouldn't be judgmental about it. He wouldn't be mean about it because he suffers from fantasies, gory fantasies as well. And so then he could share those with me and I would be non-judgmental about it. And it was very much the safe space for the both of us of our brains don't work like other people's. And it's a very lonely existence when you have that emotional numbness put on you and then trying to talk to people who are more emotionally free. It's very overstimulating. It's very intimidating. You never know what to say and you're trying to read how they're taking things or how they're doing, and it's like a different language that you have to kind of learn. And then, you know, I didn't have good boundaries being that young and that fresh out of my home. I did not have good boundaries. I hadn't even really started recovery yet. And so I was very ignorant and I held a lot of toxic beliefs from my family. And he also was in that same spot. And it's been messing my brain up, right? Because his behavior is not excused. He has hurt me tremendously. And the anger I feel about just me mentioning it, I am getting hot. I'm getting psychogenic fevers from the anger episodes that kind of take over my body. And it's like I'm literally steaming mad. And I'm not trying to excuse his behavior at all, but I think it is important to explore the origins of that and to explore the connection that abuse survivors will have with each other. Because that connection, that validation in a world that stigmatizes mental health so heavily is a big, huge reason why abusive relationships go on for so long. Some people never leave their abusive relationship and they just are in those abuse cycles for years. Neither of them ever able to emotionally express themselves. Instead, they play out these roles that they were taught growing up. This is what men are for. This is what women are for. Women can be like this. Like, women can be sad. They can be very social with their friends because women love to talk. That another thing, another stigma thing that very much hurts a lot of people. But okay, I'm getting off track again. I'm getting hot, so I'm going to look back at my list. I don't really have an answer for how to fix this because it is so complicated and it is so pervasive. And I think that's what my earlier, more unhinged video was getting at. Although I said it in very different terms, it was getting at this is a huge cultural problem. The effect that propaganda has had, and not only propaganda, but stigma and the traditional belief system that has perpetuated these heavily gatekept gender roles. And if you don't fit into it, well, you're weird. And or you're a snowflake. Oh, you must be a snowflake, or you must be whatever it is. To shame people into fitting into that box. Why have a box? Why should we fit all the people into a box? Why do we need to fit gender into a box like that? Why do we need to perpetuate these really stale, bad ideas onto our children still? And why isn't there more discussion about this? Because it is so pervasive. And I think that if people just hate on incels, that won't fix the problem. Because not only are there incels, but there's plenty of other people like that who wouldn't call themselves incels, but they have those same belief systems. They may not believe in Chad and Stacy and, you know, the specialized incel culture that is from that, but they do have a certain emotionally disconnected perspective that will make them dehumanize those around them, and it will make them dehumanize themselves. And it is extremely frightening to think about that going unchecked, and to think about that not only going unchecked, but getting inflamed by people actively hating on them. And not that they should give them a pass at all. But if you think about it, they need to emotionally connect. And if you just tell people that they're wrong and stupid and idiotic for believing that belief system without realizing where that belief system comes from and why they are so entrenched in it, they don't mean to be entrenched in it. I didn't ask to have this belief system when I was born. And what I'm struggling with is realizing they didn't either. They didn't either. None of us did. None of us abuse survivors asked for this. And what's also been kind of feeding this perspective is I've been thinking to myself, I've been watching this YouTuber named Emma Thorne lately, and I adore her. I think her content can be triggering, so she's very good about letting you know that. But she says this thing on her channel all the time of be angry at the behavior, not the person. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Because there's quite a few behaviors that have been done and assaulted and rapey at me. But also, I'm thinking about the times that I have empathized with abusive people, and it's in that sad spot. It's in that despair. It's in that, well, this is just the way it is and nothing can change because I'm hopeless and everything is hopeless. And I want to save people from that. I guess I have a fucking complex going on right now, which will hopefully calm down. But I do want to speak on that, and I want to open up the conversation of, okay, this is an issue. Emotional abuse, especially. I mean, all the abuses are bad. But for this sort of emotional numbness, emotional abuse, shaming, guilt, using these as weapons to try to silence that is only going to inflame it. It's only going to add gas to a group of people who already have issues with keeping their anger under control and controlling their impulses and their rage that they never know how to let out appropriately. It is incredibly difficult trying to think through anger and trying to find a healthy coping mechanism for it when you don't have that nurturing parental relationship to show you how to do it. And then to be extra shamed of like, well, if you're mentally ill, you're bad. If you are sad, you're bad. If you are this, you know, you're not a real man. And that's so much pressure. That is so much pressure. And keep in mind, I was just assaulted by a man, a very sexist man. And I was seeking comfort for some horrific flashbacks I told this man. I am not in a good space. I don't want to, I don't want to cross over into the sexual territory. I just want hugs. I just want that feeling. And like, if you're not into that, no, I'm into that. I'm into that. But as soon as he got the opportunity, so I'm fresh out of this shit. It hasn't even been, or I guess today it's been 1 full week since I was assaulted. And so I just want to iterate, like, I don't want the behavior to continue. And that's my focus. And that is kind of why I'm going on this ramble. Because I think in order to actually address the issue, we need to openly talk about it. And that way, if you see a friend of yours falling into these belief systems, you can offer support and be like, hey man, it looks like you're going through a really hard time. I want to hear about your stress. I want to hear about your sad stories. And yeah, maybe that won't work. Maybe they'll just abuse you and then you have to cut them off. I have to cut a lot of these people off. For my own safety, I have to cut them off. I'm not suggesting that survivors do this. But, maybe some of you neurotypical people who want to comment on the incel community and have the mental well-being and you don't have the triggers associated with it like us abuse survivors do, maybe if you want to reach out to them and offer support, we would really appreciate that. That would be really great. Because they need friends. They need wholesome people in their life to learn how to be that way. They need a real life example of a human who cares about them to show them how to live like that. And if you don't put in that effort, they will continue in the abuse cycles we're in. The abuse survivors who are more enabler, skewed to the enabler side of things, will keep getting raped and abused. And this is such a widespread problem. We can't just throw them all in jail. And also, if we did that, it would just get worse, because then what? We're adding more trauma. We're sending them to prison for what? For them to come back out and be even more repressed and angry. But like I said, this is a complicated issue. And this is me brainstorming. And like I said, I'm processing. So in this space, I say all of the ideas that just kind of pop into my head. And I didn't pre-write a lot of that last stuff. I had a skeletal thing of like, all right, I need to talk about the incel stuff, and then I'm just gonna probably go on my processing rambles. I definitely don't mean to imply that you should not call the cops on your abuser if they're trying to kill you. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking about the less violent incel-y type people. I'm talking about the people who have these belief systems, but it's not to the point where they can't control their impulses. It's not to that point yet. They haven't been under that pressure that has put them over the edge. Because a lot of times, these belief systems can be paired with a person who is actually really nice and wants to connect, but they've only had this belief system to offer them an explanation for the world. And those are the most important people to make those genuine connections with. For the I'm giving that off to the people who don't suffer every day from flashbacks and stuff. Please, no survivors, do not reach out to your ex-abuser. Just because we can empathize with them does not mean that we should put down our boundaries and allow them into our space. I am more of, like, please, more mentally healthy people and people who they aren't trying to kill. Please, can you offer them some fucking support? Please. Because if you don't, I don't want half of the country to have to be put into prison because they don't know how to emotionally regulate themselves. That's an insane thing too. So, but I've been talking for a while, and so I'm gonna take a break. And I'm also warm. I should probably take off the sweatshirt, but yeah, I've been thinking a lot, and thank you for sitting with me through this process session. I'm not gonna. This isn't an advice video at all. It's more of just like a pondering, philosophizing video of like, well, here's some weird ideas. If there is anything that I hope people can take out of it, it's just thinking about flashbacks in a different way and like how to break them down, and like taking a step back from them and kind of seeing a larger picture with it that helps me displace myself. So I don't even know if that's really healthy, but maybe it is. It definitely helps me. It helps me put energy into things like this, where I share my ideas and I share my perspectives on injustices that help me feel better about what I've been through. Because it's like, okay, this is me trying to address the issue and address the problem and give a perspective that I think isn't talked about very much. And that's because it's really uncomfortable to try and empathize and relate with abusive people. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth the time to do, because then that will shift the conversation to one that in the long run will help more people heal and less people get stuck in it. And that's what I want. I want to kind of shove that conversation that way of like, okay, all these things are unhealthy and abusive, and yes, but how do we change what we're talking about so that that progress can be made? And yeah, but I'm over explaining myself now, dear God, and I'm uppity, and I'm a little upset because, you know, still going through my own emotional irregulation. So yeah, that's just what I've been thinking about lately, and I've been working a lot, and I've been, you know, just, I'm still autopiloting. I'm still doing all the stuff I gotta do. Not to brag, but I only had to ask one day off of work to like weep. So, but I hope everybody's having good ones, and I really appreciate this community, and yeah, I love people commenting on the videos. Like, that makes me feel so good to know that people can relate with me and validate my feelings, so I'm not feeling so alone, and that helps me build my self-worth feeling too, which is like, that's priceless. What you guys offer me in engagement is priceless, because my heart feeling good is the best feeling good. Like, not to brag, but my heart warming is a very good feeling. So, yeah, I just hope you all are doing good ones, and I will see you later in this processing journey.